Welcome to True Crime Sleep Stories, where the shadows of unsolved mysteries linger just long enough to pull you into a deep, restful sleep. I'm your host, Kelli Brink. Imagine a cozy family home on Christmas Eve, filled with the warmth of holiday cheer. Then, in the dead of night, flames erupt and swallow everything. 5 children vanish without a trace. Were they consumed by the fire, or were they stolen away into the darkness? Tonight, we delve into one of America's most haunting, unsolved cases, the missing Sodder children of 1945. Before we begin, a quick thank you to all our listeners for joining us in these eerie tales. If you are enjoying the show and want exclusive bonus episodes, early access, and ad-free listening, consider becoming a Patreon member at patreon.com/Kelli Brink. Your support helps keep these stories coming. And now, a quick sponsor break. We'll be right back after this with your uninterrupted story. Welcome back to True Crime Sleep Stories. Now, settle in and get cozy, because I'm about to tell you a story. The year was 1945, and the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, nestled in the Appalachian Hills, was home to a thriving Italian-American family known as the Sodders. George Sodder, a hard-working immigrant from Sardinia, Italy, had arrived in the United States as a young man in 1908. He left behind his homeland and rarely spoke of the reasons why. He built a new life, first as a railroad worker, then as a successful owner of a trucking company that hauled coal and dirt. He married Jennie Cipriani, another Italian immigrant, in 1922, and together they raised a large family in a 2-story timber frame house just outside of town. George was known as a respected and outspoken member of the community. His family was considered one of the most prominent middle-class families in the area. However, George held strong opinions, especially about politics in Italy. He was vehemently opposed to Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator, and he was not afraid to voice his criticisms, even among fellow Italian immigrants. This earned him enemies and led to heated arguments. By Christmas of 1945, the Sodders had 10 children, ranging in age from toddlers to young adults. Their second oldest son, Joe, was away serving in the military during World War II. The family was celebrating the holiday with great excitement. The oldest daughter, 19-year-old Marion, worked at a local dime store and surprised her younger siblings, 12-year-old Martha, 8-year-old Jennie Jr., and 5-year-old Betty, with new toys. The children were thrilled and begged their mother to let them stay up late. Jennie agreed as long as the older boys who were still awake, 14-year-old Maurice and 9-year-old Louis, took care of the evening chores, such as feeding the animals. George and the 2 eldest sons at home, 22-year-old John and 16-year-old George Jr., had worked hard that day and were already asleep. Jennie took the youngest child, 3-year-old Sylvia, to bed with her around 10 o'clock in the evening. The night seemed perfectly ordinary until it was not. Around 12:30 in the morning, the telephone rang downstairs. Jennie woke up and went to answer it. A woman's voice, one she did not recognize, asked for someone Jennie had never heard of. In the background, Jennie heard strange laughter and the clink of glasses, as if a party were taking place. Jennie told the caller it was a wrong number and hung up. As she did, she noticed that the house lights were still on and the curtains were undrawn, things the children usually took care of. Marion was asleep on the living room couch. Jennie assumed the other children had gone up to their bedrooms in the attic. She turned off the lights, closed the curtains, and returned to bed. About half an hour later, at 1 o'clock in the morning, Jennie was awakened again by a loud bang on the roof, followed by a rolling sound. She listened for a moment, heard nothing more, and drifted back to sleep. Then came the smell of smoke. Thick and acrid, it filled the air. Jennie bolted awake and discovered that George's office was already engulfed in flames. The fire raged around the telephone wire and the fuse box. Chaos erupted immediately. Jennie woke George, who quickly roused the older boys. They shouted desperately for the children upstairs, but no response came. The stairway was already ablaze, blocking any path to the attic bedrooms. George, barefoot and frantic, tried to climb the exterior wall of the house. He smashed a window and cut his arm badly in the process. He ran for the ladder that was usually kept leaning against the house, but it was nowhere to be found. In desperation, George attempted to move his work trucks closer to the house so he could climb onto them and reach the attic windows. Neither truck would start, even though both had worked perfectly earlier that day. A barrel of water kept nearby for emergencies was frozen solid. Attempts to call for help failed repeatedly. The house telephone was dead. Marion ran to a neighbor's house to telephone the fire department, but no operator answered. A passing motorist who saw the flames tried to call from a nearby tavern, but that telephone was broken. It took someone driving into town to personally alert the fire chief. George, Jennie, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr. were the only ones who escaped the house. They could do nothing but watch helplessly as the home burned and collapsed in just 45 minutes. The fire department, short-staffed because of the war, arrived hours later and could do little. By morning, Fire Chief F.J. Maurice searched through the ashes. He told the Sodders that he had found no bones. He suggested that the intense heat of the fire had completely cremated the bodies of the 5 missing children. 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jennie Jr., and 5-year-old Betty. The official ruling came quickly. The fire was declared an accident caused by faulty wiring. Death certificates were issued for the 5 children, and a coroner's inquest confirmed the accidental finding. But for the Sodder family, the nightmare was only beginning. Grief soon gave way to doubt as strange and troubling details began to surface. Why had the Christmas lights remained on during the early stages of the fire if the cause was truly electrical? The house had been rewired recently, and the local power company had inspected it and declared it safe. A telephone repairman later revealed that the house lines had not burned through in the fire. They had been deliberately cut high up on a pole, requiring someone to climb 14 feet and reach out to sever them. The missing ladder was eventually found dumped in an embankment far from the house. George believed his trucks had been tampered with. Threats from earlier in the year came back to haunt the family. a life insurance salesman, angry after George refused his services, had warned that the house would go up in smoke and the children would be destroyed because of George's outspoken remarks against Mussolini. Another man, pretending to look for work, had pointed at the fuse boxes and said they would cause a fire someday, despite the recent rewiring. In the weeks before Christmas, the older Sodder boys had noticed a strange car parked along the highway, its occupants watching the younger children as they returned home from school. Witnesses began to come forward with unsettling accounts. A bus driver who passed through Fayetteville late that Christmas Eve said he saw people throwing balls of fire onto the roof of the Sodder house. Months later, when the snow melted, young Sylvia found a strange, hard, dark green rubber object in the yard. George believed it resembled a type of incendiary grenade. One woman watching the fire from the road claimed she saw the 5 missing children peering out of a passing car as the house burned. Another woman at a roadside rest stop said she served the children breakfast the next morning and noticed a car with Florida license plates in the parking lot. The Sodders hired a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley. He discovered that the threatening insurance salesman had served on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire accidental. Rumors spread that Fire Chief Maurice had found a human heart in the ashes, placed it in a metal box, and buried it secretly to give the family closure. When confronted, Maurice led George and the investigator to the spot. They dug up the box only to learn from a funeral director that the contents were fresh beef liver that had never been exposed to fire. In 1949, the Sodders persuaded a pathologist from Washington, D.C. to conduct a thorough excavation of the site. Workers found a few coins, a damaged dictionary, and several human vertebrae. Experts at the Smithsonian Institution analyzed the bones and determined they came from a person aged 16 to 22 with no signs of fire damage. The bones most likely came from the fill dirt George had bulldozed over the site years earlier. State and federal investigations in the early 1950s produced no new leads. The Federal Bureau of Investigation briefly considered it a possible interstate kidnapping, but closed the case after 2 years. The Sodder family never gave up hope. They printed flyers with photographs of the 5 children and offered a reward, first $5,000, then $10,000. In 1952, they erected a large billboard along State Route 16 with the children's pictures and details of the reward. It stood for decades as a landmark and a plea for answers. Reports of sightings poured in. A hotel owner in Charleston claimed to have seen the children a week after the fire, traveling with Italian-speaking adults who acted hostile when she tried to speak to the children. Leads took George across the country to New York, St. Louis, Texas, and Florida. None proved conclusive. In 1967, a letter arrived with no return address and a postmark from Central City, Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a man in his 30s who bore a striking resemblance to what Lewis might have looked like as an adult. On the back, someone had written, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Ill boys. A 9013235." The family sent a private detective to investigate, but he never reported back, and the trail went cold. The photograph was added to the billboard and enlarged for the family's fireplace mantel. George Sodder died in 1969, still searching for answers. Jennie wore black for the rest of her life, tending a memorial garden she planted at the site of the former house. She passed away in 1989, and shortly afterward, the weathered billboard was taken down. The surviving children, especially Sylvia, who passed away in 2021, continued to seek the truth. They believed their siblings had been kidnapped, perhaps in retaliation linked to the Sicilian mafia or George's political views, and possibly taken to Italy. The family held on to the hope that the children had survived and stayed away to protect the rest of the family. Nearly 80 years later, the 5 Sodder children remain missing. No confirmed remains have ever been found. Some modern fire experts and researchers believe the children perished in the blaze, that smoldering embers and an incomplete search could explain the lack of bones. Others point to the cut telephone lines, the threats, the strange sightings, and the many inconsistencies as evidence of arson and abduction. The site of the Sodder home is now a quiet memorial garden with plaques honoring Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty. The questions linger. What really happened on that Christmas Eve in 1945? Did 5 innocent children die in an accidental fire? Or were they taken and given new lives far away? This is the enduring mystery of the Sodder children. One family's unbreakable hope in the face of unimaginable loss. Thank you for listening to this episode of True Crime Sleep Stories. True Crime Sleep Stories is hosted and created by Kelli Brink, produced with the support of our dedicated team. Subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform to help us keep telling these haunting tales. Visit patreon.com/Kelli Brink for exclusive content and to join our community. Thank you for listening, and we will meet you in the shadows next time. Until then, stay safe out there and lock your doors. Good night.